Welcome to this CRMG podcast. This is an open discussion by industry professionals around topics that are at the heart of cybersecurity and information risk. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Martin Tully. He's a principal consultant at CRMG. I'm Nick Frost. I'm the co-founder and director at Cyber Risk Management, CRMG, which is a leading provider of cybersecurity and information risk consultancy services. Today, we're going to be talking about the importance of organizations completing a cybersecurity diagnostic assessment. CRMG is very proud to launch its CSDA, the Cybersecurity Diagnostic Assessment Tool. And this is a tool that allows organizations to quickly and easily understand the extent to which they comply against a range of leading industry standards, including ISO, including NIST, including the NIS directive. So we've got a range of these different diagnostic assessment tools available to use. But today we wanted to have a quick discussion both around how we would use this and the types of scenarios and when you would use and apply the CSDA. So I've got a couple of questions to kick this discussion off with Martin. So Martin, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me, Nick. Well, thank you.
Okay, so let's kick off. So, Martin, what is the importance of organisations determining their cybersecurity maturity? And I'm thinking particularly here those that are small and medium-sized organisations.
Well, I'd say, Nick, the short answer is obviously very important, and I think it's become even more important over even the last 2 or 3 years in particular, where there might be sort of lots of different needs to assess the maturity of cybersecurity. Not just from regulatory pressures or obligations. There's obligations of, if you are a small to medium-sized organisation, you might be a supplier to a larger one, or you might have suppliers yourself that are going down the supply chain, and also when you're going for maybe different tenders for potentially providing services to different types of organisations, then quite often it's a prerequisite now. Even the last figures, in the last few years, to have an assessment of the cybersecurity and the maturity of cybersecurity, so that you're not putting either other organisations' information in the public domain, for example, that you're protecting it according to what's in a service level agreement or a contract. So there's lots of different reasons, and that's made it important for any organisation, not just small to medium-sized organisations, to determine their cybersecurity maturity. But just picking up on the small to medium-sized in particular, we know that just by the definition is that they might be maybe have not too many employees within the organisation. There might be one employee that's tasked with managing cybersecurity, but also it's maybe 20% of their role for elsewhere in IT. So it's important to sort of share or to at least understand how well the areas are doing particularly well in, which is always something that's overlooked in terms of protecting security, the security of information, but also the areas that they could also improve on, which the CSDA can be useful. Yeah,
thanks for that. And I think you're right. I mean, the nice thing about the CSDA is it's straightforward to use, gives you a quick overview and insight into what the security status is, as for any of those environments or situations you described there. And I think also, just thinking about recent discussions I've been having, especially around cybersecurity and mergers and acquisitions, whereby there's going to be an increase in mergers and acquisitions, obviously with the effects of COVID on the economy. And part of an M&A process now is emphasizing the need to understand, what current cybersecurity controls and perceived risks could look like. So the CSDA is ideally positioned for those as well.
Yeah, and you pick up it's a good point, Nick, on that one in particular, and in relation to probably the reason why there are so there are likely to be mergers and acquisitions is a shortage of budget, and that's also where where cybersecurity maturity assessment comes in is to really focus in on or hone in on where the areas of security you need to improve and the areas that you are doing well in. It might be it might be that you're spending maybe too much in one area that you're over controlling, and maybe not enough in another area. So it's a good way of diverting some budgets and resources in the right area, and just make the most effective use of the money you've got available.
Great, superb. All right, so can you give us an idea in terms of what you think the best way is for an organisation to regularly assess their control status? Just some of the more pragmatic, planning aspects, and how it actually, what are the mechanics behind getting this as a regular activity for organisations to follow?
Well, I'd say, the overall one best way is where, if it's a larger organisation or an SME organisation, is that everybody is involved in the process. In terms of assessing, there's lots of different areas of cybersecurity to assess. That there be management areas like policies or security management or business continuity, HR, but there'll also be more technical areas like access control and more technical security areas. So it does rely on the people being brought on board to make sure that any questions that they might be asked, that they also answer truthfully and accurately, because that will provide the clearer picture that the organisation has about their cybersecurity. But I'd say overall it needs to be driven by I'd say one person that has the buy-in from all of the different stakeholders within an organisation that they can go to, get real answers to, and if it's possible, then to back that up with some documentation or some evidence that then can sort of support some of those answers. Then that makes it better. When it's time to reassess, you've already got a set of documentation there that you can refer to that says, well, last year we were doing really well on malware deployment, for example. Where are we this year, sort of thing. So all of those factors, but it's I think the primary one is that everybody is pulling in the right direction. There's no sort of blockers or anybody that might be maybe protecting their area and maybe saying it's better than it is. So it just relies on all the people within the organisation to be available and to support the need to assess where they are as an organisation in terms of maturity for cybersecurity.
Brilliant. Okay. And as you said there, I suppose there are a number of, we in CRMG, we use the CSDA as part of a consultancy offering. So we can come in using the CSDA and provide that independent view of security controls. Okay. So once you've gone through the CSDA then, Martin, you've conducted, whether it's an interview based only or you've used some of the evidence you described. What then are the next steps an organisation would typically take to get, to take those results and do something with them?
Yeah, it's one of these where the next steps here is probably the most interesting part, really, and it's really sort of where the analytical sort of brains might be more involved at that stage, because having run CSDA engagements in the past for CRMG, you might be tempted to sort of maybe focus in on the areas that you're sort of maybe answering as maybe limited or initial areas in terms of maturity, the areas basically that are scoring quite low in terms of a maturity assessment, which the CSDA provides. However, I think it is important there to sort of to look at those areas and sort of say, well, maybe we might be prepared to accept a limited set of scoring for this particular area, and to really to understand that approach is really then to involving again the various stakeholders. Maybe it's at this stage it's probably a smaller group of more senior individuals maybe within security and within the wider business to really understand, okay, what we're trying to do now is matching against the business objectives, and that you might have already defined some areas of risk, for example, that you'd like to maybe increase the level of controls in. So I think here you're really sort of looking at taking away the results of the completed CSDA, having those discussions internally and having a look at where the areas for improvement are. There might be, as I say, there might be some of those areas that are best left alone. There might be very low risk areas that are okay, and it comes back to the level of resourcing and budget that you've got available to leave those. But what the important thing is matching up to business objectives, any business risks that you identified, and where there are overlaps to to where there might be areas of security that could be improved. Those would be the areas that you could then put on a roadmap or a set of recommendations to then fix those or manage those more focused over the next maybe period of time. So as an overview, it is taking the results, looking at the areas that could be improved, looking at the areas that you're already doing really well in, because it's quite often to really communicate the good messages to the organisation. It's not all going to be doom and gloom. There'll be areas that you'd be doing well in, but it is matching up the areas that do need improvement against any risks, the business objectives, and then finding out what are the priority areas that you do need to invest in over the short, medium, and long term to make sure that from a risk perspective that you're managing controls effectively.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, it's a good point there, because as you say, there's a sort of emphasis on the roadmap that highlights, well, which control gaps are more important than others. So, just thinking here about, recent clients we've been speaking to in the retail sector, and there's such a big emphasis now on establishing that online capability, and to fast track that online capability because of COVID. So, and so there's greater emphasis now around availability of your online.com presence, more so now than ever before. So, if there are gaps to do with your business continuity planning, what may have been an important control gap in the past may well now be a critical control gap, given the changes that we see with particularly in the retail sector.
Yeah, and I think overall, Nick, as well, it's what we're trying to get away from. I think generally what cybersecurity has to some extent got away from is just that kind of tick box exercise, that fully compliance driven approach, which the CSDA should not be used for. It should be should be part of a wider conversation to the organisation. Sort of say, like you say, any new opportunities that the organisation is moving into. How can security help those kind of initiatives from taking off, really? And if it is, for example, to improve an organisation's approach to remote working at the moment, or controls over mobile devices, then maybe those are the areas that an organisation should increase the priority for those areas, as opposed to some of the areas that might traditionally have come out as part of a security assessment.
Thanks for that, Martin. And just a quick one, just to try and dig down a little bit more. Who should be responsible for a CSDA, both in terms of, driving the CSDA from our side, but also, completing it and providing the necessary input?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it does rely on a few different people having different roles, and it sometimes does depend on the organisation. It does work. I find, and I'm not just saying it because I've driven CSDA assessments for CRMG on a number of occasions, but it does seem to work quite well when I've got into an organisation, and you can start to explain the questions. You can expand on what they mean. You can show what the outputs would be off the back of the assessment. And you could do that in an independent way. So you kind of sit between different parts of not only cybersecurity, but because you've got HR as part of the CSDA, you've got business continuity as part of the CSDA. You can start to cut across different employees and business units within the organisation you're working with. So it does work well when we have driven the CSDA from a CRMG perspective within an organisation. And that said, as well, you typically have somebody identified. Usually one person. It's usually, I would say, the security manager. The roles and responsibilities will be different across all organisations, but usually it's somebody that's responsible for for managing security on a day-to-day basis. As I said earlier on, it might not be their full-time role, but it'd be somebody that's identified as having ownership or responsibility for security that you can then would be the port of call that I would normally engage with primarily. And then what happens normally then is a series of interviews with different people from the organisation. Not just the security manager. Maybe the security manager is there on most of the interviews with myself, and then with a subject matter expert from the organisation that can answer the question. So it is a bit of a team effort, I would say. But in terms of who drives it, usually it's been myself or a colleague that might usually sort of drive the CSDA, because we're in a position of being able to explain what the tool means and what the questions mean, and try to get real accurate and correct answers really for the CSDA to make the actions off the back of that more applicable to the assessment. Yeah.
No, indeed. I think getting that objectivity is absolutely key. Okay, great. I just wonder if we can jump into a little bit more detail around, different sort of use case studies. If you could give me, I don't know, one or two that you've specifically worked on, and just give an overview in terms of how they were used and what situation and what they helped achieve.
Yeah, certainly, and I think there's two in particular that are quite interesting to maybe explain on this podcast in particular. The first of those is if it's, and we've touched on a few times, that it might be a small to medium type of organisation that might be primarily interested in assessment. That's not ruling out a larger organisation for a quicker assessment, but it may be in terms of a scenario, an organisation that's maybe has grown quickly in a short space of time, or looking to seek out a few opportunities, particularly in a difficult market environment as it is at the moment. So maybe sort of looking into gaining investment, potentially going into the merger and acquisition situation that you mentioned earlier, Nick. And need to sort of start to show how well or the areas of cybersecurity that they're doing particularly well in, to maybe to clinch that tender or the merger and acquisition, or to be the organisation that is nominated to join up with a larger organisation. So that would be sort of one scenario where they very, very quickly they can start to demonstrate the areas of cybersecurity they're working on, or the areas of cybersecurity that they're doing particularly well in, and then once they've got an assessment of those areas, they can then start to match them up in terms of the services they might be able to provide to the market or to another organisation to pair up with. They can start to sort of say, we've got really good controls over, as I said earlier, remote working, over the control of their mobile devices, or over more technical areas of malware software, for example, and they've got a really good position in terms of cybersecurity to start to support another organisation. And then they might then because the CSDA can be done very quickly and effectively, it's a maturity-based assessment. They can start to share those results with another organisation, or to clinch those services that they're trying to go for. So it's a very quick, straightforward assessment. They can start to demonstrate they have taken cybersecurity very seriously, and it has been shown, in very recent times that's been a differentiator for some organisations clinching these contracts. So that's probably the first scenario there. And the second one that sort of springs to mind is, and I think there must be people listening to this podcast that either themselves or they've known somebody that's been in this very position, where they might have taken on maybe a new role within a new organisation. They're given the first 30 days, let's say, for making sure they understand how well security is being managed within an organisation. Typically, it might be the board, the first board meeting, they're asked to assess cybersecurity in terms of where areas need to be improved and where there might be budget for future activities to improve cybersecurity. And the CSDA could provide that person with that quick assessment to then share some of the outputs with the board. There's outputs in terms of different dashboards that you can gain from the information that you can get from the CSDA. You can put them in presentations very quickly and easily that a board member would understand very, 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 very easily. So it's to answer that kind of question from a board member, the first 30-day position that you're into, tell us how well or the areas we're doing well in for cybersecurity, but also the areas that you'd like us to invest in. The CSDA could be the tool that that particular manager could use to share the responses or the outputs to the board in their regular monthly discussions.
Okay, brilliant. So it gives you that high level sort of directional view for the board, and I suppose also, that's kind of useful information to know where to target, budgets and investments, for cybersecurity as well. Indeed. All right. Well, thanks very much for that, Martin. Thanks very much for your insight. And thank you for tuning in to the CRMG podcast. So we will be sitting down for regular discussions where we give our insights based on our own professional experience, which spans around 30 years each of us within the team. We hope you enjoy this podcast and join us next time. To find out more about the cybersecurity diagnostic tool that we've developed, as well as about CRMG, visit us at www.crmg-consult.com. Or if you'd like to give us feedback or suggestion for a topic in the future for us to discuss, then contact us at info@crmg-consult.com. Thanks very much.